Hey everyone, welcome back to another video for the Warhammer private server Interbellum, and this time this is the one. This is the one I'll be waiting for. This is the one I was anxious to see how they're going to fix things for the engineer and the rest of the dwarfs. So strap in, let's go and see the mechanics for the dwarfs. The Ironbreaker, which now will be known as the Dwarf Warrior, still uses grudges as it did before, and it starts at 0 and max out at 100. However, on the Interbellum server, there will be a tactic increasing it to 150, giving you the ability to do more skills and abilities with the amount of grudges you have per fill up. Now, you will gain 3 grudges whenever any group mate with 100 feet of you is attacked. So you do not gain any grudges when you are hit personally, which means no longer trying to get into combat and draw attention. As long as any of your group mates is attacked, you gain grudges, which means the flow of grudges now will be building a lot faster. Taking account, we're going to have, let's say, another tank and 2 DPS, that's 3 people being attacked, giving you 3 grudges every time they're attacked. You will also have, you will not have a basic attack that generates action points, and this is mentioned because some classes generate action points when they attack, and when the mechanics are released, we'll see which ones are and how exactly that's going to work. However, you will have a basic attack which generates 3 grudges. So, group mates being attacked at 100 feet, you get grudges, 3 of them, and another 3 when you use your basic attack to generate a little bit more. Furthermore, we have a massive change into the Oath Friend. The Oath Friend as a skill, it doesn't exist anymore, but the mechanism is still there, but modified. So the Oath buffs, as they call them, will cost grudges from now on, and when you do use one of those oath buffs, then the caster will be benefited and the defensive target. So you don't have one person that you have to buff like we did before. This is why the Blackguards and the Arrowbreakers are called personal bodyguards, because they could only buff one person through the Oath Friend. Now what happens is any person you select as a defensive target plus yourself will receive the buffs from the oath buffs, which means in a rotation gameplay you can target your healer ones, you can target your melee DPS, your ranged DPS, the other tank, and as long as you change your defensive target and then you use one of the oath buffs using grudges, you'll have the ability to buff more than one person. This may be a little bit difficult in combat to do, but I'm pretty sure skilled players and experienced players will have no problem rotating those buffs and helping the whole party. So now you have a more use into the party than you did before. Also, AP regeneration is going to be required. You won't have a basic attack that generates them. However, you can use grudges and a specific ability that it will generate you AP. Every class has something to do with AP because we have augments, we have grudges, we have hatred, we have other skills we've seen. But AP will always be there, and this is the way the Dwarf Warrior will generate their AP. Now, as before, here again, some abilities will scale with the amount of core and grudges that you have, as it did before on the Arrowbreaker. But since you can increase that to 150, I would like to assume, because it hasn't been clarified, that it won't be 20 to 40 you do that amount of damage or whatever, but the more you have, the more damage you do, and it will scale. We have to wait a little bit to see how that's gonna be as a mechanism in the game, but with the tactic at 150, I want to believe that the Ironbreaker will overcome the limitation of the damage output it had before, and now it will have the ability to output a little bit more damage than before and make it feel more useful through the new oath buffs and the extra damage scaling through the grudges. Now, we've seen so far, you're going to get 3 grudges when you attack, which is not enough, but you get 3 for every group mate that attack, which is really good. But what happens when you play solo? So for this specific reason, they have added a tactic, which you're going to have to sacrifice 1 slot to invert the way grudge is generated to help you out with the solo play. The exact words they use is there will be a tactic that inverts the way grudge is generated for solo play. I'm assuming you get more when you're attacked and when you're attacking, something like that. We'll see, because they haven't clarified. However, the Dwarf Warrior, aka Ironbreaker, seems to maintain the same mechanism with grudges. Good change, so you can spread your buffs easier and faster to your group through the Oath Friend being removed and replaced with Oath buffs. And the way you get grudges, you will have a massive influx of grudges, giving you the ability to play more aggressively, more active. It feels like a much better proactive gameplay. So that's for the Dwarf Warrior. Let's go and see the one I was excited to see. And this is going to take a long time because it's the class on the dwarves that have the most changes. And let's see if they're good or bad. All right, here we go. Engineer. Engineer is the class that has received the most changes from all the classes, I think, in the game. Maybe the Magus, even the Magus. So let's go and dig into it because this is going to take a few minutes. So the engineer new mechanic is called Dawi munitions. So you can hold up to a maximum of 10 bullets, 10 grenades, and 10 kits. That corresponds to the marksman, the left tree, grenades for the grenadier, and kit for the tinker, the third tree. You will generate one kit every 12 seconds. It feels like the buffing mechanism from the turrets that was taking approximately the same amount of time. Now it's been moved into the generation of the kits. The regular abilities cost action points, and there is a cost for a certain number of bullets, grenades, or kits. So there's a combination there. Depending if you use a grenade, you're going to use a grenade. Munition, if you want to use something for the marksman, you're going to use a bullet. From the tinker, a kit, plus with the AP in between. So there's going to be a rotation between those things. Now, outside of a kit, the rest of the munitions are not normally generating during combat. So when you're under combat, you're going to have your 10 bullets and your 10 grenades. Kits may be generating during combat. This is totally different mechanism already, and I want to see what happens, you know, when the bullets are running out and things like that. So the abilities that cost action points will allow you to craft those munition. Okay, so we're not going to run out, but we are going to probably stop DPSing to generate them. So they break it down a little bit on the different specializations. So the rifleman will have more bullet-based abilities. Yes, the grenadier will have more grenade-based abilities, and the tinkerers will have more kit-based abilities. Don't forget, the tinkerer tree has been converted to a non-standard tank, a ranged non-standard tank. We're going to see how that's going to work at another video. So we no longer have a basic attack. Just to remind you, the engineer had a ranged auto attack that was working from 0 feet to 180 feet, whatever it was, and it was used in between the global cooldowns to shoot the enemy. Now we do not have a basic attack, so we generate action points with an ability that costs 1 kit, and it's called Ammo Pack, which will give us AP to us and the defensive target within 30 feet. So being close to an engineer, it could be a benefit to other ranged classes like Bright Wizard, Shadow Warriors, so they can get AP every time we generate AP as engineers. Now the rifleman will have the ability to place a gun turret down. That's going to cost him 2 kits. Now, the turret will provide 1 bullet to its owner every 2 seconds as long as they are within 30 feet. Here again, we see the dependability of the engineer to the turret, but since he can generate those ammunition every 2 seconds, it means that pretty much we'll have an unlimited uptime of using his bullet skills. So he becomes a real powerhouse from a range this way. Now the turret is instant, so we don't have to waste a tactic for instant deployment, and also it has no cooldown, which means that as long as you have kits, you can spam it, also giving you mobility. You can run forward, drop it, run forward, drop it, but you have to keep an eye on your kits, which you're going to have to stop and generate through your skills. Now this is the downside to this. You're stuck to it. You have unlimited use of your bullet abilities, but if you have to become mobile and you have to move and you want your turret with you, then you become hindered because you deployed once, twice, 3 times. You're gonna start running out of kits. You're gonna have to stop to generate more kits. It's an active and resource management mechanic, which feels good at this point. Now, having said that, you also have to keep in mind there will be no redeploy skill either. So you can deploy it instantly without using AP, but kits as many times as you want, so you're quick about it. You don't have that delay of 10 seconds to get your damage up. Your damage is going to be what it is, plus a little bit from the turret. But I think the most important thing for the turret will be to generate the bullets so you can keep using their abilities from a range. Also, redeploying your turret, the skill doesn't exist, but what it means here, because they mentioned this, redeploy your turret is going to cost you 2 kits. I already mentioned this. If you move, you drop again a new turret. There is no buffing time as before. So that's why there's no free redeployment there. You have it instant, you use your kits, and you got to manage that and your movement. Now, for the Grenadiers, it becomes even more fun because Grenadiers do not have turrets anymore. We don't have to worry about dropping it, waiting to buff your damage, or do anything else. Now, off your global cooldown, it's a different cooldown because we have the global cooldowns and the off-global cooldowns. There's a skill and ability called Improvise, which converts your kits into grenades. You start with 10 grenades and you start with 10 kits, which is the maximum. So you're going to use your grenade abilities, you're going to grind that number down, then you can convert your kits into grenades. And they say that this will allow the engineers to spam more grenades whenever they need into a pinch. So again, resource management. I'd like to point out here that most classes so far that we've seen, there is a resource management in everyone. We've seen how the Dog, the Witch Elf, the Sork, the Blackguard so far, and the Ironbreaker are going to have to manage the resources wisely to create execution windows, to manage grudges, to be nearby people, to switch targets to buff. The gameplay becomes more active. So you have to actually pay attention and have some sort of a skill as a player to keep moving left and right, changing targets, converting things in combat while you move or you position. The gameplay becomes more active and you gotta be there when you play. Now, finally, we have the Tinkerers, which I'll remind you, they are tanks, not defensive builds, not tanking builds, but they're tanks. We have the standard tanks, such as Chosen Knight, Blackguard, Ironbreaker, and then you have the non-standard, like Slayer, Marauder, Lion, Engineer, to go along. Now, the Engineers are going to be tanks. We have range skills, and that can be a little bit terrifying, having a very tank character shooting you from afar. However, in order to balance that, they have limited availability of bullets and grenades. So they have more kits being tanks, but they don't have enough bullets and grenades. So unless they stop to craft, we cannot sustain range damage output. So probably we're going to have, as non-standard tanks, a little bit of burst from range, but then we're going to have to spend a lot of time to convert our kits into bullets, into grenades to have extra abilities there. In the meantime, we're just going to have to be using, I suppose, AP skills, and then we have to generate more. So the gameplay again here becomes resource management, picking of targets, bursting windows. So the gameplay, I think, becomes a lot more difficult, especially for the solo players, because if you're going to play an engineer tank, soloing might be a bit of a problem because you need to have the other people around to coordinate for those windows, the same as for other classes. I am still waiting to see gameplay. I'm hoping to open up the private server public testing one, so maybe we are selecting, we can go and have a look and see that. So the engineer no longer is really tied up, except maybe the sniper build into the turret. There's no more damage buff, which means you will enter the combat at the same level as every other class, not having to wait to get your damage up. New mechanism, managing resources, AP. It feels good to have a Grenadier with no turret. Being tank, I love it. You know this, you know how I play. I'm looking forward to see this mechanism and how useful the non-standard tanks are going to be over the normal tanks and whether they actually are viable. So let's go and see now the OathBreakers, the Slayers, for those you crazy Slayer people. So those crazy OathBreakers are back and they're still going to be using Rage. They're going to get pissed off in battle. So the mechanism remains pretty much the same as Rage, which starts at 0 and goes all the way to a maximum of 100. However, this time it will decay at a value of 1 rage per second. Whether you're in combat or not, it's going to be decaying. Now, the other change here is that it doesn't generate rage when you are in combat. You generate whenever you take damage or you deal damage in the form of a buff, which lasts 5 seconds, and then you generate 6 rage per second. So this is the new mechanism. You just don't hit something, and then for a certain amount of time you get rage. You have to keep hitting and receiving damage to generate that. The only thing I'm not clear here, and we'll try and clarify and put this on the comments later, is whether if you attack twice, if the buff is refreshed or it stacks up to a certain level. That is something I want to clarify, but I didn't have the time. But this new mechanism creates a much more active gameplay than before. Now, as rage goes up, there's going to be some breakpoints that you get some effects depending on how much rage you have. So between 26 and 75 rage, you become furious, which causes you to lose 50% of your armor and 50% of all your resistances. This is pretty much standard as it was on the previous version of the games, but this time you also gain 20% penetration equal to 20% of the amount you lost. So you're not only losing something, you're also gaining something. 20% penetration, it sounds very high for me at this point, but don't forget, and I'd like to make a small parenthesis here and say that there was a few comments saying like these devs don't have anything written in stone, they're not very certain. Yes, they're not, because there's a second circle of testing coming out. So if the 20% feels too much, it'll probably go to 15. If it feels too low, it might go to 25 or 30. But right now we're just seeing the basic mechanics and ideas behind all the classes. So far we've seen the Dark Elves and we're seeing the Dwarves, so we're waiting for the next. Now, moving on with the Oathbreaker mechanic. So at 2675, you lose 50% of your armor and 50% of your resistances, and you gain penetration equal to 20% of the amount lost. Now, between 76 and 100 rage, you become Berserker, same classification as before, which in addition to the previous state, so you still lose 50% armor, 50% resistances, and you gain a 20% penetration, 20% equal to the amount you lost. You also will lose 0.75 times of your percentage incoming healing stat. Don't forget, we have stats about incoming healing, outgoing healing, so you're going to lose some of the healing you receive, but the exchange for that is that you will gain melee attack power equal to 10 times the amount of this stat lost. So you will basically, let's summarize this a little bit easier. You lose 50% armor, 50% resistances, and 0.75 times your incoming healing stat. So you receive less healing at maximum rage, and you gain 20% of the amount lost from the armor resistance as armor penetration in general, sorry, not armor, just penetration. And you also gain 10 times the amount of healing you lost into melee power. So there is the outgoing damage goes up as your resistance goes down. Pretty much the same mechanism, but slightly different with the healing reduction there. Exhaust skills, however, they don't exist, so you will not be able to use one skill and go from 100 rage to 0. They have been removed. However, you will have some other skills that will consume a certain amount of rage. So you could be at 100 and you use something, go to 75, another skill, go to 55, and you can go up and down a little bit. So you could go 100%, do a lot of damage because you gain that 10 times melee attack power to how much healing you lost, and then use 2 skills, drop down to Furious state, your healing goes back to full again. You can be healed, and then you can go into combat again and build your rage up and deal more damage. So you're going to have these windows, I'm assuming, where you can burst, you come down with rage, heal up a little bit better, and go out there with more damage. Finally, for the Oathbreakers, there will be a secondary mechanism, which we didn't have before, called Bloodthirst. The Bloodthirst lasts for 60 seconds and stacks a maximum of 5. Bloodthirst will also generate 1 rage per second per stack, so you could have up to 5 raids per second with this, and they will be generated primarily by some abilities. By saying primarily, probably there will be another mechanism that we'll release later, by abilities that consume rage. So you will lose rage and then you'll produce more rage by using those abilities. It feels to me you're almost never going to have a rage problem here. Whether it is whenever you're attacking or receiving damage, you're not going to have a problem with the secondary mechanism. Your stronger abilities will be the ones that consume Bloodthirst. So you will be battling, getting the rage up, using those Bloodthirst abilities to drop raids and at the same time generate more to go back up again and maintain that extra 10 times melee attack power to what healing you lost. Now this, according to the devs, and this is a quote, it will give better control of the mechanic than before, and it will be far more punishing than before, because you have that healing reduction. It will be more punishing if you don't pay attention, if you don't play with your mechanism. Yet another mechanism that requires you to control resources, the rage and the bloodthirst in this case. Go up, deal the damage, go down, heal more, go up, go down, you know, keep playing with this mechanism. Nevertheless, it is a much more active mechanism. It does feel better to control rage. Instead of going to 0, you can drop it to a level you want to keep it close to the Berserker state or Fury state by playing with your abilities and damage outputs. And I think, yeah, it will be more punishing because you make a mistake, you keep that healing off, 0.75 of the healing stat, it will be quite a bit. Nevertheless, let's hope we're going to see how this is going to work when the second circle of beta testing starts, and we'll get an opportunity, hopefully an opportunity if we are accepted, to try all these classes out and get some more insight. However, we still have to go and see the Rumescribes, also known as the Rune Priest, because they got a little bit of melee changes as well. Let's go and have a look. So the Rune Priest will be now known as the Rumescribe on the Interbellum server, and as we've seen on the previous video about hard specializations, now they are offensive melee support, defensive melee support, and range healers. Their new mechanisms is called Runic Magic. There are 3 ancestral rune categories here for the magic: Grimnin, Valea, and Grugni, the gods. So when you use an ability from one category, you gain a depleted ancestral rune for that category that lasts 8 seconds and prevents all abilities in that category to be used. So if you use a spell from the Grimnir category of magic, then you cannot use anything that has to do with Grimnir for the next 8 seconds, which means you can use something from Valea and Grugni. If you use Valea, then you have another 8 seconds, you can use that. So if you, for example, use Grimnir at second 1, then at second 2 after the cooldowns, Valea, then you have locked Grimnin right now for 7 seconds, Valea for another 8, and you only have Grugni left to use. However, to make up for this shared cooldown system, most of the abilities either they have 0 action points, or the output levels are far higher than the listed action point costs, which means you're going to heal a lot more. So there is a give and take in every build we've seen so far, in every mechanism. You lose something, you gain something. Here you get locked out for 8 seconds. So those spells have to be targeted very specifically and count. So you get them for 0 action points and you got to play. However, you will also have some abilities out of the GCD, which will cause the next skill you use to be augmented in addition to whatever they do, but they do not apply to the depleted ancestor rune. So you can augment a skill already on cooldown on that tree, if I understand this correctly. However, we've seen the augmentation on the Sorks as well, on the Dark Elves, on the last video we did, and this is the other classes using augmentation. So according to the devs, the players will have to choose what skills to use and when a little bit more carefully because of this shared lockout from the skills for entire 8 seconds, but they can spam what they want at higher effects if they have the AP to augment. Now, I'm not sure how that's going to work when you're locked out, but we will have to wait and see. It sounds a very interesting mechanism. So the 3 hard specialization, which are Rune Lords, can venerate their ancestors to convert their resistances into melee and spell power. That's the offensive support. So they're going to convert that. They're going to utilize resistances and convert into melee and spell power. So I'm supposed they lose something, they gain something. The Rune Priests themselves, they have a kind of version of the old Oath buffs where they can mark a friendly target and receive additional heals. That is, I believe, the normal healer version. And then Runesmiths, they use something similar to the old Master Runes that actually will have abilities which target around the area. That is the defensive support. There isn't a lot to say about the Rune Priest because it's also been talked on the round table, and also the actual tree for the skills has been recorded, so you can go and check that video out on the right timestamp and see the skills. We kind of pass through all of them and you can see that. I'm not sure how everything is going to work. And this is kind of like my final thoughts on this video. The Ironbreaker seems to maintain the same thing, with more grudges coming in, more group play orientated, with a much more interesting and easier to manage mechanism. The Engineer has been completely refurbished, with no turrets on the Grenadier, constant abilities being spammed next to the turret as a sniper, a non-standard tank. And this is something I like to focus a little bit on the Engineer, the non-standard tank, because that idea has been suggested to other servers in the past, and it was ignored and passed because Order has more range. People like to play more range on Order. We always asked for a ranged tank that can defend the Bright Wizards, Shadow Warriors, the Sniper NGs at the back lines while being useful. It seems like we are getting, as engineers, our wish. So the Engineer could be that ranged tank that can protect the range of the back lines and don't feel so defenseless. Slayer mechanism, a lot easier to manage the new mechanism. You get rage when you've been hit, when you hit yourself. You also, when you use Bloodthirst, the secondary mechanism, which is brand new, easier to manage the resource, but much more punishing if you make a mistake, if you don't manage your rage correctly, your fury, your different states between Furies and Berserker, because you're also going to have reduced healing. And finally, the Rune Priest, which no longer is going to be the guy at the back spamming AoE heal, AoE heal. It can go melee, it can go at the front lines as an offensive support, as a defensive support, or just a healer, but with a much more interesting mechanism that you have to pay attention. Choose your spells carefully, choose how and who to heal and when to heal, and you no longer just can, look around and keep spamming one button, which for me, guys, this seems like we're going to have a very active game, a very modern game. I just would like to remind you all that nothing is set in stone. And by that, I mean that the mechanism is going to be what they are and what we're describing here. The numbers, however, may change a little bit, because there, as I said earlier, there were some comments on YouTube and people say, oh, nothing is written in stone, they don't know what they're doing. This is why the second round of testing is going to come out when it comes out, and you all can apply for testers when that happens. I'll let you know when I know. And hopefully they'll do the testing, and if something like 20% bonus on something is too high, it will reduce. If it's too low, it's going to go up. That little micromanagement has to be done in advance. But as mechanisms, as ideas, I find them to be very good, especially for the Engineer. Let's wait and see, because I've just heard that they're going to be releasing as fast as they can the rest of the races to see all the other mechanisms. Let's see them all, and then we can have an overall discussion at some point on Twitch, all of them out there to discuss and see ideas, maybe suggest some more stuff to the devs, and take it from there. So until the next video, guys, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, leave your comments below. We try and get more information as we go along. If you got questions, don't forget there's always a link on the description for the Interbellum Discord. You can jump in and talk directly to the devs, because comments on YouTube are helpful, but it might take a little bit. And I'll see you on the next video, which should be sometime this week. I've heard the next race is coming out.